This is the story of a teenager who did what most people only dream of, not by building a company, not by investing early, but by stealing over 4,100 Bitcoin. His name is Malone Lam. Born and raised in Singapore, he was barely 20 when he pulled off one of the largest cryptocurrency thefts in history. Malone didn't use malware or brute force. Instead, he posed as Google and crypto exchange support and tricked his way into account access. Within minutes, he drained more than $230 million worth of Bitcoin from a single wallet. He wasn't working alone. He had help, and he had a plan. What came next was a lifestyle ripped straight from fantasy. Malone spent like money had no meaning. He drove custom Lamborghinis, rented luxury homes in Miami and Los Angeles, partied in the Hamptons, and wore million-dollar watches. At exclusive events, guests walked away with designer bags as party favors. He bought 28 exotic cars, spent hundreds of thousands in a single night, and flew across the world as if the money would never run out. He was young, anonymous, and, for a while, untouchable. But behind the scenes, the operation was larger than it seemed. Malone had teamed up with John Serrano, a fellow gamer he met through Minecraft. Together, they built a 13-member criminal network stretching across multiple countries. Their tools were VPNs, peel chains, fake support portals, and crypto mixers. Their targets were wealthy, distracted, and unprepared. For over a year, the group quietly siphoned millions while enjoying the rewards in broad daylight. And then, inevitably, it collapsed. But before all that, before the parties and the police and the downfall, there was a beginning. A childhood, a slow burn into obsession. So let's go back to where it started. Let's rewind to the origin of Malone Lam. Malone Lam didn't come from wealth, but he came from something more dangerous: curiosity without limits. He grew up in Singapore in a quiet household, spending most of his teenage life behind a computer screen. While most kids used games to escape reality, Malone used them to understand it. Minecraft was his first sandbox, not just for fun, but for control. He loved building things, systems mostly, and then testing how they broke. And slowly, almost without noticing, the lines between games and real life started to blur. He wasn't the kind of kid to talk much in class or post photos of himself online. He was watching, reading, learning. Forums became his second home, places where anonymity meant freedom and usernames meant more than real names. He read threads about security flaws, user behavior, network vulnerabilities, not because he wanted to break laws, at least not at first, but because the internet gave him access to a world where rules felt optional and knowledge felt like power. It started small. He'd replicate login pages for websites just to see if he could match every pixel. Then he'd send those pages to throwaway accounts he created himself, testing what kind of language made people click, what kind of subject line got past filters, what kind of tone built trust. He was practicing, not like a hacker in the movies, smashing keyboards, but like a craftsman, refining every word, every message, every move. He learned about phishing, social engineering, browser fingerprinting, SIM swapping, VPN tunneling. He didn't need to be taught. He needed to be left alone with an internet connection. Eventually, Malone started to realize he wasn't alone. On Discord, in niche communities, he met other teenagers just like him. Quiet, intelligent, obsessed with figuring out how to manipulate the digital world. One of them was John Serrano, a kid from the US who shared Malone's mindset and mirrored his hunger for control. They bonded quickly. There wasn't much small talk. There didn't need to be. They were building something bigger than friendship. They were building a system. It didn't take long before curiosity turned into intention. They started by watching people, high net worth individuals who overshared online, who flaunted their crypto holdings, who posted screenshots of wallet balances without understanding the risk. One particular investor caught Malone's attention. He was active on Reddit and Twitter, vocal about security, proud of his setup, confident in his experience. But to Malone, he looked exposed. They mapped out every detail: his exchange accounts, the domain names he used, the email service he relied on, the type of two-factor authentication he mentioned in passing. Malone recreated the login page for one of the exchanges the investor used. It wasn't just close, it was identical. He then drafted a fake email, disguised as a legitimate security alert, urging the victim to verify suspicious activity. The message was clean, free of typos, full of urgency, but calm enough to avoid suspicion. And as the victim opened that email, Malone followed with a phone call. He had practiced the voice, the phrasing, the exact support tone used by Google's actual teams. He introduced himself, referenced the same issue the email mentioned, and walked the victim through a series of verification steps. There was nothing aggressive, nothing loud, just structure, pacing, and pressure. And at the perfect moment, the investor, believing he was protecting his own funds, approved a login. Within seconds, Malone had full access to the wallet. Inside was over 4,100 Bitcoin. At the time, that meant more than $230 million. The transfer happened silently. The money moved through multiple wallets, peeled into smaller amounts, routed through mixers, anonymized. To the outside world, it was just another transaction on the blockchain. But to Malone, it was proof. Proof that he wasn't just some smart kid with time on his hands. He had pulled off something enormous, something people would talk about, something that felt, for the first time in his life, completely real. There was no celebration. Not yet. He sat at his desk, watching the numbers shift on the screen, letting the reality sink in. No alarms were raised, no doors kicked down, no headlines. He had done it. Cleanly, quietly. He had become rich, beyond rich, without anyone even knowing his name. But the thing about money, especially money that isn't yours, is that it doesn't like to stay quiet. And neither did Malone. After the heist, something shifted. Malone didn't change overnight, but the world around him did. He no longer had to imagine what it felt like to be rich. He was, but this wasn't investment money or startup capital or a quiet win on a risky trade. This was stolen, fast, and completely liquid. The kind of wealth that doesn't ask questions. The kind that only wants to be spent. It started small, at least by his new standards. A watch here, a new setup there, but quickly restraint gave way to curiosity. He rented a place in Miami, then another one in Los Angeles. He didn't live in them. He collected them. He bought cars not because he liked driving, but because he could. Lamborghini Aventador, Ferrari 812, McLaren P1, each one custom, each one delivered discreetly. He wasn't trying to blend in. He was trying to see how far he could go before someone said something. He'd throw parties, the kind you only see in music videos. No theme, no limit, no rules. Guests would walk into rented villas and leave with $10,000 handbags. Champagne was poured like water. One night alone cost him $500,000. It didn't matter. The wallet kept refilling. The money wasn't tied to a job or a balance sheet. It had no history, just movement, just speed. He was living like there was no tomorrow. And in a way, he knew there wouldn't be. Back in the background, John D. Serrano was doing the same. The crew had expanded. What started as 2 teenagers had now become a loose, 13-member operation. They weren't just spending anymore. They were building infrastructure, VPNs across different continents, burner phones registered under fake names, crypto tumblers, mixers, and peeling chains to fragment the funds. Some acted as money mules, others moved assets through stablecoins and back into Bitcoin. They studied every method law enforcement used and built mirrors to hide from them. But at the same time, law enforcement had started to notice, slowly at first, almost imperceptibly, but then with growing interest. The scale of the theft, the sophistication of the laundering, it stood out. Investigators began tracing blockchain transactions, looking for patterns. They found similarities between wallets, timed movements, unusual routes. They reached out to exchanges, matched user activity. They found burner emails that pointed back to real accounts, flight records that overlapped with wallet logins, surveillance footage tied to purchases. Piece by piece, they built a map. And Malone, unknowingly, made it easier. He couldn't resist showing off. Not directly, never names or faces, but there were hints. A rare car parked in a location too specific, a watch in a photo that hadn't been released to the public. He posted just enough for people to wonder, and just enough for the wrong people to start looking closely. Maybe he wanted to be caught. Maybe he thought he couldn't be. Or maybe, after everything, he just didn't care. In August 2024, the net closed. FBI agents tracked Malone's activity across multiple cities. Surveillance was confirmed. Search warrants were issued. They didn't go in guns blazing. They didn't need to. They already had what they needed. On a quiet morning in Los Angeles, Malone Lam was arrested. He didn't resist. There was no dramatic chase, no last-second escape, just a knock, a badge, and the end of everything. Serrano was arrested shortly after in Miami. Several other members of the group were detained in coordinated raids. Federal agents seized millions in crypto, along with 28 luxury cars, dozens of watches, and documents linking the network to thefts far beyond the original 4,100 Bitcoin. The charges were massive: wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, identity theft, and violations under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Together, they faced decades in prison. For Malone, it wasn't just the end of a scam. It was the end of an identity. For years, he had lived in shadows, built his persona in layers of anonymity. But in the end, it wasn't a technical flaw that caught him. It wasn't a code bug or a software exploit. It was him. His own need to be noticed. His own belief that he could outsmart everyone forever.